We can slow stand slow.
Yeah, I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
No.
Then they will stand as presented. Okay, moving on to item 4, we have open forum at this point. If anybody wanted to say anything or ask any questions, now is the time. Okay, that was quick. Okay, item 5, are agenda changes?
Can I move that we have the walk-ons put into the consent agenda?
No, that would be what, new business?
New business items,
C.
C, D, E.
Okay. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, moving on to recognitions. There's a good chance to say thank you to Patty Mester for long-term service here, ladies.
Absolutely, and she certainly has a count on the remaining Mondays.
And we know every Monday. You know that. And we talk
She
to her.
had it down to a couple seconds when she was calculating.
She's got it down.
She's
One of the best steals we ever made. And that was a steal.
Okay, need a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So we do so with regret.
She's very excited to start the next chapter.
Okay, presentations. First one,
Me.
Ms. Bell.
Great. John, would you mind just one light,
You got
Debbie? Thank you.
Frank's not here to say you can't talk.
That's right, it's time. Oh, it's much better, thanks. So here we are again with another budget presentation, and we're starting to get closer to the end. This one hopefully is a little bit clearer to see. So tonight I'll be bringing to you the general support projection so far. As we work through this budget process, tonight is the final sort of numbers in that first draft of the proposal for 17-18. The next board meeting that we have is on the 20th, and that will be the final version that we'll be bringing to you, and at that time we'll have propositions. And so even though these numbers are all where I think right now they look pretty good, we may be bringing some final changes back on the 20th as we really get down to every single dollar aligning with our future revenue stream. So for this evening, same format as usual. I would bring your attention to the 15-16 column on the left, which are final expenditures. Those are good gauging numbers. Some of these numbers I look at 3-year averages. Others I look at 2-year averages. So where did we land in 15-16? Where are we currently? I don't have those numbers up here in front of us this evening because it's still difficult to gauge. We make a projection, we grab numbers that we of current expenses to date, and then we project from to date through the end of the fiscal. And then you'll see more toward the right, 17-18 proposal. And probably the most important line to look at for this evening's purposes is the next one to the right that says change. I would focus in on the dollar amount of change versus the percent change. Percentages, as I've said many times before, can be very misleading. So you can see, as I've been saying consistently throughout the budget season, we are looking at a relatively flat budget, increases mostly in terms of salary increases and some areas that the administrative team has really voiced an opinion for in terms of contractual items or professional development or things of that nature. But for this evening's purposes, this is general support. So I think the biggest line here that stands out to us is that of business administration. And we just accepted the retirement request of Patty. And so you can see that we have made an adjustment this current fiscal where we wanted a full year of transition, so our treasury services are currently at TST BOCES, and so you can see we've decreased that business administration line, which includes a salary, a portion of that salary that is currently being paid out, and that will be a true savings next fiscal. So we're able to reduce that line significantly. The other lines, insignificant changes, again, just carrying forward with business as usual. Those current budget lines are meeting our needs at this point. The next line I would draw your attention to here is the legal line. You can see in 15-16 our true expenditures were around 35,000. This year I anticipate currently that they will come in under that. However, is a safeguard, just planning for the unknown, and as our budget does get tighter, we do need to have money allocated for that particular line in case something does come up. We do need to be able to pay for those legal fees. So I did take the liberty to reduce that line of around 8,000, and I feel like that's still a very safe number for us to carry forward. The next line, public information and services. This is a line that Michael and I talked about this afternoon. That line has been holding pretty consistent. That's where we hire all of our consulting services. So this year, as you know, we brought in the consultant regarding the capital project, or the proposed capital project. So it very well could be before March 20th that we'll look more closely as an administrative team at that line, and we may reduce that significantly, as I'm not certain at this time that we're planning for a future consultant in the next fiscal. So we could see a significant reduction there. But for the time being, I'm holding that line pretty flat. And I think overall, you can see at the bottom a significant reduction in the total administration line of about 58,000. And again, a lot of that goes back to shifting treasury services to TST BOCES.
Kimberly, what was, I'm sorry, the one, special items?
Special items, that represents, hold on, I have it right here. So this is a heavy line. It represents the administration that we pay at TST BOCES, which is about 314,000 by itself. There's a capital line there for BOCES. Currently that's being held at 25,000. BOCES will be here at our next board meeting, and they'll be presenting, and that line will change, could change significantly. However, I'll wait until next week and let them speak to what they're proposing for the capital project. So that's where we could see some changes.
In anticipation that it's gonna change for the better or the worse?
Well, they are proposing a significant capital project. However, there are different ways to fund that capital project. So I believe that a good share of that burden we could offset this fiscal. So you can use part of your BOCES refund for that. You can borrow, a variety of ways of paying for that expense. However, it's all dependent upon all 8 school districts approving that, so having a municipal agreement. So right now, it's too soon to call for that, so on the 20th, when we really have, for the most part, very finalized numbers before we actually go out with the budget hearing, which of course, one more time it could potentially change, but prior to the board approving the final budget. But at this point, I'm just using that 25,000 as a placeholder. It could stay that same figure, or assuming that we could fund it in other alternative ways, and I'll let BOCES speak to that next week.
And the personnel line, Kimberly, is
The personnel line.
second one? Full
That
blown.
actually represents, workman's comp, our benefits claim coordinator at BOCES, which is our health insurance coordinator at BOCES, and Omni, so it's really a BOCES expense.
Okay.
Mhm. Any other questions there? So again, you can see where we made some slight reductions. For the most part, 1% or 2 increases where we could get by with that. Really trying to keep pretty much everything the same. Moving on to operation of plant, maintenance of plant. You can see here at operation of plant, there is a slight increase of about 21,000. This current fiscal, we incorporated, it was not budgeted, a seasonal position, which has worked out really well. That seasonal position, we extended a couple of times here at the board level, and additionally, we've had some extensive long-term absences that we funded. So that also represents some substitute expenses. Not knowing where some of our employees will be next fiscal. Right now, Joe and I are deciding to keep that line where it's at with that, including that increase. Again, that could change slightly, but I anticipate as a safeguard in order to be able to fund some of those absences with substitutes, it's probably best to leave that line inflated to include an additional 22,000. Maintenance of plant, we decreased that slightly. And that's really due to a contractual line being decreased. You will see this spring that the contractual side of the concession stand will be completed. So we'll have that done, and so that will no longer need to be budgeted in that particular line. The biggest line on this slide that you should pay attention to is debt services. I've mentioned this before, as our capital expense falls off, our revenue stream drops off at the same rate. However, it does indicate here that we will have a decrease in expense of just under 500,000. So that will be reflected in the overall budget as well, but also in the revenue stream. Overall, and down to garage building, you can see that's a savings of almost $12,000. And that again is reducing a contractual line. That contractual line is being reduced because we did complete the lift in the garage building, and that's not a future expense moving forward to the next fiscal. And that concludes it for this evening on the budget. The final draft will be presented next board meeting, and BOCES will be here to present as well. That's where we'll include the propositions on the buses. Hopefully at that time we'll include the proposition for the capital reserve if we choose to reestablish that has expired. And we'll go through the entire budget at that time, and we'll still have time to make changes after that before the board adopts the final budget.
So no new programs are being presented?
Not tonight. Well, we've had some conversation, but we've got a list about this long, and we don't think we'll be able, we're still talking our way through it, trying to figure out what's the most efficient way to meet the building needs, but not new programs.
At this point, it looks very close, including what we're getting in our local revenue stream from the tax increase up against the added together with the state aid, including the federal grants that are never represented in the revenue stream because they're aside, including the pre-K grant, which is also a federal piece. It looks at this point that we will be very close. There may be a small addition. We had talked about a separate director of curriculum, and at this point that looks like it'll fit within the current budget. However, the budget that we proposed that was included the last presentation, however, anything above and beyond that we'll be looking to reduce maybe some of the contractual lines, maybe some of the equipment lines, things that are away from students if we want to expand program.
And where do we stand in terms of being able to increase our capital reserve fund?
It's too soon to call at this point. And one of the reasons why that is too soon to call is that if there is additional fund balance when BOCES comes to do their presentation about the future capital project, that is one of the ways that we can fund that. So some districts are looking at potentially borrowing and raising taxes to cover their capital expense at BOCES, and I would prefer not to do that. So if we have additional fund balance, that may be a way that we would pay that expense rather than including it in our next fiscal budget.
So does that take it off the table then in terms of looking to increase our capital reserve for our potential capital project?
Actually, no. We still have the debt service fund, which you'll see in the final revenue stream. I'm projecting $25,000 to pull out of that. It's not a reserve, but it acts very much like a reserve. So I would pull $25,000 out of that just to satisfy the comptroller to show that we're continuing to make movement, moving the money out and paying an expense. However, we don't need that because the revenue that comes in from the state actually covers our full capital debt expenditure. So That debt service fund, I would like to propose closer to probably around June, probably after the budget passes, to dissolve that and push that into our capital reserve. So there's two pieces that would happen. We would have, our capital reserve has actually expired, or I'm sorry, we established a new one, however, the limit will not be high enough. So we'll be looking closely at that at the next couple of weeks to see if the language should be to increase the limit on that or reach the limit on that and establish a second one. So I'll have to reach out to Tim McGill and see which way they want us to go. But definitely there's 2.5 million in that debt service fund that could be added to our capital reserve to offset the expense of a future capital project.
And so the final budget is going to be presented on March 20th,
Yes.
and when do we have to vote on it? What's the drop dead date for that?
April 13th, I think.
Yeah, so and you have a board meeting April 10th.
And we're well within our range of being able to do this.
Yes, yeah, there's still time for discussion.
So discussion next meeting and one after that.
That's correct.
Is it possible to share what you'll be presenting before that board meeting
Yes.
with us? So
Yes.
that we can just kind of write up any questions that we have,
Yeah.
have some time to look at it.
Well, and what we've done in the past is kind of summarize the program changes, but we just, well, as I said, we're talking about them, but we haven't really kind of come to agreement as a team on recommendations.
Get in the middle of the rain and fight it out here, folks.
Well, we're working collaboratively.
I'm a scrapper.
Yeah, me too. We bring wiffle ball bats to all of the administrative
We can
meetings.
bring, we can help, we can bring some props.
You know, I've been trying to bring back dodgeball.
Honestly, overall, I don't see a lot of room for significant changes. We're.
In the bottom line or how we're spending it, because I think there's a real distinction as to whether we're either spending a significantly more or less amount of money, or we're reshuffling the deck and taking some cards out and putting new cards in,
So we continue to reduce salary lines to get them closer to actual. However, at this point, when we're building the budget, we're looking at building, so for 15-16 retro, 16-17 retro, and then a proposal for 17-18. So there is currently fund balance this fiscal because we haven't settled contracts. However, moving forward, those salary lines need to continue to be inflated because we need to accommodate for essentially 3 years of increases. So that's one of those moving numbers, depending on where we settle, what that could mean for us this year. So this year, if we don't settle soon, that could contribute to fund balance. So again, another moving number for the fund balance scenario.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, ma'am. Number crunching going on. Okay, our next presentation, we need to move to the cafeteria. This is for the robotics. And directly after that, I need a motion to adjourn to an executive session. So moved. Second? Okay. All right, so this is a walk this way, people.
Walk this way, walk.